So, I hear you're on welfare. Aren't you ashamed? Alice was my wife, but we divorced after she had an affair. Now she's remarried to George, the guy she cheated with. I wonder who told her I'm receiving welfare. It's true that I'm currently unemployed, but I see it as a reward for getting through a tough year. Who are you mistaking me for? I'm not on welfare. What? But you left your job, right? Aren't you on welfare because of that? Ellis seemed more shocked and unsettled than I imagined. I kept a straight face and said, well, I do have assets worth $10 million. My name is John Smith. I'm a 42-year-old ID engineer. You might think it's a stylish and cool job, but my daily life was pretty lackluster. I live far from downtown, so my commute is lengthy. Every morning, I wake up early and spend 2 hours commuting by bus and train. I work quietly, and if I miss the last train due to overtime, I stay at a cheap inn because I can't afford a hotel. I don't drink or interact much with colleagues, so my days end with just a commute between home and office. Once I get home, I seclude myself in my room and develop cell phone apps as a hobby. Some of my apps are already released and used by many. I wasn't into gambling or investing, but maybe buying lottery tickets every New Year's Eve was an exception. I've been doing it for years. Sometimes I won small amounts and felt joy. My life was monotonous and solitary, rarely sharing happiness with anyone. Days would pass, and I'd age. Thinking about it felt a bit lonely, but I just drifted along. In such circumstances, a twist of fate led to my marriage. My wife's name was Alice. She was 4 years younger than me. A few of my scarce friends, concerned about my lack of female companionship, introduced her to me. She seemed plain but genuine. Despite disliking shyness, I felt drawn to Alice. I wondered what she found attractive in me. Alice rarely shared her true feelings, but when I asked, she said she wanted a stable life and a secure future. Both Alice and I had long passed the usual marriage age and felt anxious about our futures. Thinking this could be our last chance for marriage, I proposed, and Alice thought along the same lines. Maybe she would have married anyone who proposed. So we got married and started living in the 2-bedroom house I had rented as a bachelor. I wanted children, but Alice was already in her late 30s, facing the risks of a late pregnancy. It's going to be tough having a child at our age. Imagine our age when the child turns 20. There's no upside to it, so let's not push for kids, she said. I felt disappointed, but her point seemed valid, so I gave up on the idea of children. Without the cost of raising kids, we could manage on my salary alone, but that's only because I led a simple life without expensive hobbies. The woman next door had a beautiful bag. I'd love one like that, a designer bag. Alice said, we don't need something so pricey. There are plenty of affordable bags that would do, I replied. You're really dull, you know that. Is your life even enjoyable? Alice said, according to Alice, the more money you have, the more enjoyable life is. Saying that my salary alone couldn't provide a fun life, Alice started working part-time at a local supermarket. The supermarket opened at 10 o'clock a.m., but she had to be there by 9 o'clock a.m. for opening preparations. Her shift varied, so sometimes when I got home early, she wasn't back yet. On those occasions, I quickly whipped up something to eat using whatever was in the fridge. My cooking was quite popular with Alice, especially when she returned exhausted. I wondered how much Alice was earning since she didn't share her earnings. I had no idea how much discretionary money she had, but seeing her buy several of her favorite brand bags and upscale cosmetics, I guessed she was working pretty hard. I didn't mind how Alice spent the money she earned through her efforts. Sometimes I wondered if we were truly happy in our marriage. I had no complaints about Alice, and she seemed to live freely, but we were not the couple who felt passionately in love. The truth was, both Alice and I felt like we were missing something in our lives. I first noticed a change in Alice about 6 months after she started her part-time job. I didn't have a strong desire to excel at work, so I tried to leave on time without doing overtime. However, due to my long commute, I usually got home around 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock p.m. Alice no longer greeted me when I got home. I'm really busy with work these days. The supermarket stays open until 9 o'clock p.m. After that, there's a lot of prep for the next day and handovers to be done. Despite having started the job just 6 months ago, I was impressed that she had become such a valuable team member. Well, that's great you're enjoying your job. We don't have kids, and I can take care of myself. Keep up the good work." Alice replied with a thank you and a smile, and ate the late dinner I had made. One Sunday, while I was cleaning the yard, our neighbor, a gossip lover named Susan, approached me. "Hi, John. Is your wife working today?" "Yes, she hardly gets any days off, but she seems to be enjoying her work, so I'm not worried." "Oh, is that so? If the husband is okay with it, maybe I shouldn't say anything." "What do you mean? Is something wrong with my wife?" Susan looked around nervously to make sure no one was listening, then whispered, "Your wife is having an affair with the supermarket manager. Several people have seen them together." I felt like I had been hit on the head. Alice is having an affair. I had naively reassured myself that Alice, being a plain woman, wouldn't get involved in such things with other men. However, lately her makeup and clothes have become more flamboyant. Perhaps men who like flashy women would be attracted to her, but that doesn't mean I can easily accept such a story. No way. My wife would never do that. I trust her. You're naive, aren't you? Anyone who sees her flashy get-up these days would notice. You should confront her about it. Indeed, Alice had lost the simple charm I loved and had completely switched to a flashy style. If this change was to please her lover, I couldn't ignore it. I immediately confronted Alice about the affair. Alice admitted to the affair without hesitation. "I want a divorce. I love George, the manager. For the first time in my life, I feel truly alive and in love. Marrying you in a hurry because of our rage was a mistake." How could she say something so cruel? Was our married life really that unenjoyable? I thought I had done everything I could for Alice, making compromises where possible, to be told that our marriage was a mistake. Feeling angry, I clenched my fists, trying hard to stay calm. Alice, seemingly indifferent to my feelings, suddenly stood up and went to the bedroom. Unable to bring myself to sleep in the same room, I spent the night on the living room sofa. The next day, Alice said, "We need to cool off a bit," and went back to her parents' house. A few days later, a woman claiming to be George's wife came to my house. "Hi, I'm Linda, George's wife. My husband wants to divorce me, and it seems your wife is the reason." I listened to Linda's story in detail. George and Linda had a 5-year-old son and a 2-year-old daughter, and Linda's days were consumed with childcare. "My husband's feelings have drifted away. He says he no longer finds me attractive now that I've become more of a mother than a wife. He told me he wants to live with the person he loves, so we should get divorced." George's selfish logic infuriated me. If Linda and I had done something wrong to our partners, I would understand, but we hadn't done anything wrong. At most, our plain and steady lifestyles led to a lack of excitement. What does he mean by "I want to live with the person I love, so let's get divorced"? For Alice, I was just a boring existence, as Linda was for George. "If we divorce, I will demand alimony from your wife. You should also claim it from George. They'll probably marry each other, but I don't want them to have an easy start to their marriage." I felt the same way. Linda was being discarded by George, and I was being abandoned by Alice. Meeting Linda and talking to her helped me decide to divorce Alice. "I understand. I will also claim alimony from George and my wife. You should do the same, Linda. Money alone can't make people happy, but it's better to have some. Let's seek our own happiness." So, Alice and I got divorced, and Linda did the same with George. Alice and George quietly paid the alimony and child support we demanded. It was as if now that they had found their true love, money didn't matter to them anymore. No words could reach them in their delirium. I just wanted to say, "Do whatever you want." Alice and George moved out of town and started living in the next town over. I threw away everything Alice had used and started a new life. Even after the divorce, I continued living in the rental house I shared with Alice. I didn't want the hassle of moving to a different apartment and thought it best to wait until I was more prepared for such a change. After the divorce, I quit the job I had for many years and started spending my days leisurely at home. I knew the neighbors were gossiping that I quit my job because of the shock of the divorce, but I didn't care what they said. Working on my computer whenever I liked and dedicating myself to gardening when the weather was nice, I spent my days leisurely. One day, the neighborhood gossip, Susan, approached me again. "John, did you quit your job? You're always home during the day." "Yes, I just can't bring myself to work right now. I'm taking some time for mental rest." Susan looked at me with a puzzled expression and said, I see. By the way, someone said they saw you at the city hall. Is that true? Yes, I have been going to the city hall once a month lately. Susan's eyes widened for a moment before she muttered something mysterious and left, saying, Well, see you later. Soon, I started feeling that the neighbors' gazes were different. At first, I didn't notice, but it seemed like they pitied me. Sure, the story of my wife Alice cheating with the local supermarket manager, George, and leaving was embarrassing, and I understood their sympathy if they pitied me for that reason. However, I soon realized it was not just that. There was a rumor about me circulating that I was living on welfare. Susan was the source of the rumor. She deduced this from the fact that I was jobless and always at home, going to the city hall once a month, and still living in a shabby rental house despite my divorce. She theorized that I didn't work because I was getting welfare payments, that my monthly city hall visits were to collect welfare checks, and that I couldn't move out of the shabby house because living in a nicer place would disqualify me from receiving welfare. I just smiled wryly, thinking, so that's what it is, but continued my days as usual. Indeed, I'm not working right now, but I considered it a reward for overcoming the pain of divorce. One day, I went to a shopping mall a bit far from home to buy gardening supplies. After shopping, I sat on a bench to relax and spotted a familiar woman. It was Alice. Alice was dressed in cheap clothes, hardly looking well off, and quickly approached me when she saw me. It's been a while. How have you been? She asked. As I didn't respond, she just sat down beside me. She stared at my clothes, confirming that I was still dressed plainly as ever. With a smirk, Alice said to me, So, I heard you're on welfare. Aren't you embarrassed? I couldn't believe that the rumor had reached Alice living in the next town. After betraying me and causing me so much pain, was she now mocking my misery? The first thing I felt upon hearing her words was that she probably wasn't in a happy situation herself. If Alice were happy, she wouldn't bother about me and would have just passed by. Unhappy herself, she couldn't resist the urge to hear about someone else's misfortune. In other words, she wanted to feel better by finding someone worse off than her. I had heard about Linda's recent situation. After receiving alimony and child support, Linda was receiving every possible allowance and worked hard. She must be living more comfortably than Alice, who was financially strained after paying alimony and child support. So, hearing about Linda probably infuriated Alice, and now she was meddling with me, someone she perceived as unfortunate. Such a poor woman. Suppressing my amusement, I pretended not to understand what she meant. Who are you confusing me with? I'm not on welfare. What? But you quit your job, right? Aren't you on welfare because of that? Alice was more surprised and fled than I had imagined. I did quit my job. Living without working isn't bad, but it would make life boring. Right now, I'm preparing for the next chapter of my life. Once I'm ready, I plan to move out of that rental house. Alice's face turned increasingly anxious. How can you live without working? And I heard you go to the city hall once a month. Isn't that to collect welfare? Susan's notorious gossiping. I didn't expect the rumor to be this detailed. I explained to Alice deliberately. The reason I can live without working is that I have money. My monthly visits to the city hall are for the legal consultations they provide. I've rested enough, and I'm thinking about starting a business. Money? Starting a business. Alice became more confused. Weren't you just a regular employee with hardly any money, and you quit your job? Starting a business. Are you crazy? When we were married, I had given Alice access to all my savings accounts, so she knew very well that I didn't have much money back then. In her mind, if I had money, she wouldn't have left me for George. Keeping a straight face, I told Alice, Well, I do have assets worth $10 million. Alice's mouth dropped open in disbelief, uttering a stunned, What? Yes, I now have assets worth $10 million. Let me explain how it all happened. I think I mentioned before that I have a hobby of buying lottery tickets. I've never gambled on things like casinos or horse racing, but lottery tickets are a kind of gamble in a broad sense. You buy a ticket and get to dream big until the day of the draw. I used to spend about $11,000 a year on lottery tickets, saving up my allowance while married. I gave up buying lottery tickets to help ease the family budget, thinking about our family's future. But after the divorce, such considerations didn't matter anymore. 2 months after separating from Alice, I casually went for a walk and ended up in the shopping district. There was a long line in front of me, and when I peeked, it led to a lottery ticket booth. Oh, the New Year's lottery tickets are on sale now. Feeling an urge to buy due to the long wait, I rushed to an ATM and withdrew $2,000. I handed the $2,000 to the ticket seller, who smiled and said, "I wish you luck." Somehow, it felt like there was a halo around the vendor's head. From that moment, I had a strange premonition and started attending seminars for people wanting to start their own businesses, with no real basis for my actions. To make room for new beginnings, I cleared out old items I had kept for memories. I sorted out the past to start anew for myself. Then, on the lottery draw day, I checked the official website and confirmed that I had won a total of $10 million, including the front and back prizes. Despite my strange premonition, I never really thought I would actually win. The emotions were beyond just happiness or surprise. I probably spent half the day in a daze. Having received $10 million, I tried not to change my life drastically. I kept the win a secret to myself. I didn't even tell my parents about it. I knew that if people found out, suddenly unknown relatives and best friends would appear out of nowhere. Building a mansion would have been a dead giveaway. I decided not to indulge in frivolous luxuries, saving the money for what I truly wanted to do first. As a reward for years of hard work, I took some time to relax. I resigned from my job and spent more time gardening, basking in the sunlight. Gardening turned out to be quite interesting, and my small garden soon bloomed with vibrant colors. After 2 months, I got bored of resting and began looking for collaborators to prepare for starting my own business. It felt like my unremarkable life and the failure to find a good partner were trials for this reward of $10 million. Being able to tell Alice about my assets now is like a reward from God for all the hardships I endured. Another stroke of luck was that the lottery win happened after our divorce. If I had won it while I was married to Alice, she would have probably squandered it. Eventually, Alice came to her senses and started interrogating me fiercely. "Why didn't you tell me you had assets worth $10 million when we were married?" Alice asked. "I didn't have such assets while we were married," I said, but I had no intention of clarifying that. I feigned ignorance and smiled. "So you're saying you wouldn't have divorced me if you knew?" Alice, struck by the core of the matter, stuttered. "Well, that is, you married me in a hurry. Right now that you've found true love, you should be happy with George," Alice screamed in frustration. "Don't joke with me, you big liar." Although being called a liar was slightly irritating, I couldn't help but feel sorry for Alice. I knew she was currently struggling financially. She had been demanded alimony by both Linda and me, and her part-time earnings were taken away, even resorting to borrowing from relatives. Alice twisted her mouth in frustration. "George doesn't have assets worth $10 million. Of course, he wouldn't. It's not common for someone close to you to have $10 million. George now has to pay alimony for both of his kids until they become adults, which means tight finances for almost the next 20 years. As I stayed silent, Alice, looking down hesitantly, began to speak. "I actually regret divorcing you." "Why aren't you happy now?" I asked. "Not at all. Things aren't going well with George. When we both had our families, there was some thrill and excitement every day. You don't feel excited now?" Alice sighed deeply. "Not at all. We just fight whenever we see each other. Hey John, can we start over?" I was shocked and dismayed at her sudden proposition. "Start over with me? That's quite presumptuous." "I'll change. You don't have a girlfriend now, do you?" Honestly, I was so angry with Alice I felt like spitting in her face. The nerve of her suggesting we get back together after everything. The emotional scars she left on me will probably never heal. "I don't have a girlfriend, but even if I stay single for the rest of my life, I'd never get back together with you." I thought I made myself clear, but Alice wouldn't give up. "Then could you at least lend me $100,000? I'll definitely pay you back. $100,000 is nothing for someone with $10 million. The audacity of the request. I struggled to maintain my composure and keep a calm face. "I have no intention of lending money to anyone, especially not to someone who betrayed me. If I had $100,000 to spare, I'd rather donate it to some facility." Alice bit her lip in frustration and muttered softly, "I see. All right, I'll have to figure it out on my own. After saying that, Alice stood up from the bench, her steps heavy as she walked away. Whenever I'm in the garden, Susan almost always appears and chats about various things. Susan's antenna is even tuned into what's happening with Alice and others living in the neighboring town. Alice seemed to be having a hard time. She's not getting along with her husband. I also heard that they started living separately the other day. Living separated, huh? Does that mean they're heading towards divorce? Alice really did something foolish. Affairs that cause others misery always come back to bite you in the end. It's like that with celebrities too, right? I'm not sure whether everyone who does such things faces repercussions, but there are certainly people who do. I wonder how they're managing financially after the separation. Is Alice working part-time again? Apparently, she's resorting to cash advances to cover living expenses. Once it reaches that point, it's pretty much over. Her husband, George, was fired from the supermarket and is now working day-to-day jobs. It seems Susan is well informed about Alice and George's financial situation. If someone like her found out, I want $10 million in the lottery, it would cause quite a stir. I planned to keep it a secret while I was in this town and then move to an unknown place when the time was right. Eventually, I'd heard that Alice and George got divorced. Now that she had no reliable partner, she might turn to me again. So I quickly bought a condo in an area closer to the center of the city, far from this town, and moved there. I invested part of my $10 million as capital and started my own business company. I rented a small office and began with just 3 employees, including myself. Not even my closest employees know about my $10 million asset. I believe keeping it a secret is best for maintaining close relationships. The business is doing well, and work is increasing, so I'm thinking of hiring more staff. Being a single company president, I often get introduced to wonderful women by business partners. Once the business stabilizes, considering remarriage doesn't seem like a bad idea. I feel like I'm experiencing a second youth, eager to give my all to both work and love.